All right, these Series EE bonds, let's get a little familiar with them. They're not the most important thing on the exam by any means, but just getting a general idea what these are. Series EE bonds, these are US government savings bonds designed to be a low risk investment option. They're issued at a discount and accrue interest over time, with the bonds reaching their face value upon maturity. Think back to the financial exam if you took it already, thinking about discounts, premiums, all that good stuff. Not going to get into that here because it's not relevant, but yeah, making connections between all the exams, gotta love it. Interest earned on these Series EE bonds issued after 1989. There's sometimes we'll have these dates in, from decades ago included, and there's reasons for them. I'm by no means going to get into them. You're not going to really have to worry about them now. If there are dates like, for example, alimony payments after 2018, that's going to be important. But just you don't have to worry about this date. It's just part of the lingo, I'll say, for our purposes. There is a reason for it, but don't worry about it. May qualify for exclusion from income tax under certain circumstances, one of which is when the interest is used to pay for higher education expenses. Now, to be eligible for the interest exclusion, the bond must be used to pay for tuition and fees for the taxpayer, their spouse, or a dependent enrolled in higher education. So that's higher education, that is not preschool, that is not middle school, high school. However, the interest exclusion is reduced by the amount of any qualified scholarships or other non-taxable payments received for educational expenses, excluding gifts and inheritances. This is to prevent individuals from receiving a double tax benefit, because God forbid us as individuals get a double benefit. The IRS does want to put a clamp on that. All right, here are some of just more points. Again, just kind of drilling down. To qualify for this exclusion, to qualify to not have to pay tax on that interest, we've got some conditions. Now, again, the purpose, including the principal, the interest on these bonds, must be used for qualified higher education expenses for taxpayer, spouse, or dependent. I'm drilling this down. Get it done. Memorize it, right? Room and board, as well as expenses for books and supplies, are not considered qualified. This is one I want to bring attention to because this is something we'll see throughout generally the course. Is the IRS does not view your room and board as essential to your college experience. Sorry, you might, but the IRS does not. Tuition and fees generally are going to be what educational accounts and educational amounts need to be used for. We'll see when we talk about the taxability of gifts as well, that gifts generally can be used for books and supplies. However, room and board, this is one to make note of. The IRS doesn't really care about your college experience. That's how I like to remember it. Ownership, the bonds here, these Series EE bonds issued after 1989, must be registered in the taxpayer's name or jointly with their spouse. They cannot be registered in the name of the dependent or any other individual. Additionally, they must have been issued to the taxpayer when they were at least 24 years old. Income limits, this is going to be included in our resources. Get familiar with those income limits, those adjusted gross income thresholds. Any amount of interest you can exclude will be reduced or eliminated over a certain amount. These income limits will be adjusted annually for inflation, thank God, because inflation is eating away at all of us, isn't it? Filing status, if you are married, you must file a joint income tax return to claim the interest exclusion. This is something we will see in other cases as well. We also saw this in the filing status lesson where sometimes you file just to get this Series EE bond benefit, in which case you may still not be considered married filing jointly. It's a whole thing in that other lesson where if you're filing just for the purposes of getting this benefit, the IRS is saying, okay, cool, you did it just for this. We're not going to consider you married filing jointly. Now, no double benefits, as mentioned. This amount is going to be reduced by any amount of qualified scholarships or other non-taxable payments received, so you don't get that double benefit. Here's an example. We've got to run through it. We got to make sure we understand what's going on here. So suppose you have a Series EE bond that earned $5,000 in interest. You decide to use the bond to pay for your child's tuition and fees for higher education. Your child also received a non-taxable scholarship of $2,000 and another non-taxable education grant for $1,000. So how do we determine the amount of interest that can be excluded from your income? First, we're going to subtract the scholarship and grant amounts from the total interest earned. So we see $5,000 of interest minus the scholarship minus the grant. That gives us $2,000. So in this example, $2,000 of the interest earned on the Series EE bond can be excluded from your taxable income, provided that the remaining eligibility criteria for the exclusion are met. And remember that this exclusion is only available for federal income tax purposes and may not apply to state or local taxes. Yeah, we're focusing on federal. Hey there! Are you ready to not only pass your CPA exams, but truly understand and enjoy the material while studying? I know it seems impossible, right? Especially to enjoy the material. We'll do it together. Tap into the power of CPA.Examprep.ai, where we've got personalized quizzes, multiple choice questions, memorization guides, flashcards, simulations, all tailored to your learning. Our adaptive study planning puts you on the fastest path to success and lifts you back up if you fall behind. Avoid wasting your precious time and money attempting an exam with a low chance of passing, because who wants that? We want to get you through this process as quick as possible. Our exam readiness prediction lets you walk in with confidence, knowing that you're prepared for success on exam day. Thankfully, there's no payment method needed to get started, so why don't you come join us? Visit cpa.examprep.ai and let's achieve your exam success together.